Nightlight. Art and Story by Waddell. I cast my line into the flat, glassy waters of Park Lake and think how unusual. The wind normally howls across the western farmlands, driving bits of wood, straw, and thin green foam into the folds of this overgrown shore. I'm at the northern end of the lake by the now abandoned campground, where reeds line the small bay to my right, and some 300 feet across the water is the derelict boat launch. Fishing is normally good in this spot, but the fish are not biting. There is an eerie calm that crawls over the inky water. I lift my eyes slowly from my line to the rotted timbers of the launch. The smoky smell of creosote surrounded by a strand of spruce and cottonwood that stand as silent witnesses, casting thin lines as shreds of a fading day. And the memories, the ones that I tie up to the post at the end of my mind, and somehow they slip their bonds and creep up the stairs and onto the back porch, scratching at the door. My thoughts drift out to the tragedy of the boys, and then the day Art vanished. Art and his family were a fixture on the lake and in the community, and were much loved. They lived on a farm between Nobleford and Picture Butte, and could be seen most days fishing these waters in almost any weather. Their small aluminum boat was moving around the windswept water to the best sheltered spots. Art's boys, Archie and Trevor, 16 and 18, were taught to fish as soon as they could hold a rod. Millie, their mother, had died a few years back from cancer. The three could be seen arriving at the lake at dawn or after dinner to fish into the evening, and shared their secrets to anyone interested in learning the sport. I was one of their students. Then, on the evening of July 8th, 2019, the cold waters of Park Lake quietly took a bit of the spirit from this place. As dusk approached, the whole community knew that Arch and Trevor went out on a particularly windy day and had not returned. And as the soft glow of twilight gave way to the deep black of night, the word went out to begin a search. Within an hour they found the boat, upside down, beaten by the wind into the western shore of the peninsula. Nobody called out to the rescuers. No cries for help. Just the rustling of the dogwoods frantically waving back and forth in the wind, as if trying to call the boys out of the water, and out of the water they did not come. News of their deaths moved quickly, held on a tide of voices spreading down gravel roads and across summer-fallowed fields, arriving at each farm in turn. Art was never really the same. In the weeks and months that followed, he was rarely seen in town except for the occasional trip to pick up odds and ends. Townsfolk, concerned for his well-being, would drop by with casseroles or fresh baking. But every evening, like clockwork, he could be seen driving down to the lake not to fish, but to walk the shores in search of... we could never tell. We assumed the boys, or at least the memory of them. Sometimes he would just park and sit, truck idling on the launch. I think about it now, the night he vanished. His truck at the end of the boat launch, but without Art. Simply idling, lights on, door open. Nobody knew how long it had been there, but the early morning fishers found it looking out over the lake, its dead eyes fixed on nothing but cold water and weeds that tugged at the ankles of Art's despair. There was an extensive search, of course, and it was thought that he had simply walked into the lake and drowned himself, to join his boys in their watery grave. Unable to reconcile the incredible loss of a life fully lived and then gutted and left to rot on the shores of this lake, they permanently closed this launch in the years following, cutting off access, opening another at the south end of the lake. The odd thing is, they never found any of the bodies, and for an irrigation lake, not very deep or large, this was unusual. Urban legends began to surface. Some claim they saw the boys at dusk sitting on the bank where the boat was found, or they've seen an empty boat slowly moving amongst the reeds. Others believe the boys walk the bottom, reaching up through the strands of Elodia, lightly brushing swimmers' legs or feet. Still others have said they have seen them under the water, peering up from the depths, small bubbles rising from gaping mouths to a world they are no longer a part of. Art's spirit has been spotted walking the shore, or the lights of his truck appearing on the launch, and then shortly after, disappearing. I never took these sightings too seriously. Dusk is approaching, so I decide that this is my last cast before heading home. I hook the line with my index finger and trap it against the rod, flip the bail, and draw the rod tip back over my shoulder. I look back to make sure the lure won't catch in a bit of underbrush, and in one choreographed motion, my head turns, followed by my wrist, arcing the rod tip through the air, releasing the trapped line, letting the lure and line spool out, and spool out, and spool out. My eyes fix on the launch as the blood drains from my head and pools around my feet, fixing me in place. I am motionless, mouth dry. A feeling of complete and utter disconnection engulfs. Adrenaline floods through me, but feels as if the world of the dead has opened its dark door, urging me, wordless, to pass through and join them. The lure falls into the water and sinks below the surface. I hear a sound, faint in my panicked ears. A truck, idling. I see the eyes, the lights, staring out, dead over the placid water. My thought is to run, but strangely, I don't. I feel no malice or ill intent from this apparition before me. I slowly start to reel in my line, but it snags on something. I pull and reel harder, hoping to break it free, but it is held fast on the bottom. Pulling out the clippers attached to my vest, I mechanically cut the line, letting it pull through the eyes of the rod and drop limply to the mud at my feet. I must move. I step backwards, my feet feeling like someone else's. My eyes unable to pull themselves away from this representation of art. But I glance briefly at the ground, eyes flicking immediately back to the... And in that small instant, the lights are no longer there. Stripped from my soul, my primitive brain is unable to process what has happened. My mouth opens, eyes wide as I look down at something that has caught my wild attention. A subtle movement. Very slow and purposeful. The line, cut just seconds ago, begins to withdraw into the water, being pulled by an unseen hand until the cut end slides over the boundary between water and shore and disappears from view. "Hello, Art," I whisper.